Hi, my name is Alex, and today's podcast is Living History with Alex. Today's interview is going to be with Mr. José Carbia, Archimedean Academy's philosophy teacher and history club leader. So today we're going to ask him a few questions and learn about his history and other history that he teaches as well.
Thanks so much for having me, Alex.
So, thank you for coming, and where were you from?
Well, I was born and raised in Miami, Florida. I've spent pretty much all my life here, though I was very lucky to have had spent a little time, some summers, that is, after all, the benefit of being a teacher, some summers in other places as well.
So, what inspired you to start teaching philosophy?
Oh, without a doubt, it was my father. My father was a great principal who was a preeminent educator within Miami-Dade County Public Schools for many years, decades even. And through his love of a certain pedagogy, a teaching method called Paideia, I gained an appreciation for philosophy, because something that he would always do is he would ask me philosophical questions. And so in replication of that, I always wondered, after I had acquired my philosophy degree, could I ask students similar questions and provoke interesting, thoughtful discussions? And it turns out, with Archimedean, I could have, and I did. So I was very lucky to find myself in that position, and eventually really the job of my dreams.
So, what's your favorite topic about philosophy?
Oh my. Oof. Now, among the branches of philosophy or common categories that are discussed, probably ethics would be my favorite, but I suppose that's due to my love of Socrates. As you know, Socrates was the noted father of philosophy, or some might say godfather of philosophy, whose trial and death was a dramatic sort of dilemma, or placed a dramatic dilemma on Athenian society of the time, where he, as an outspoken critic of all ideas and of those in power, was put on trial for supposedly having corrupted the youth and disrespected the gods, and as a result was subsequently executed. Seeing his teaching method in action through my father is primarily what inspired my love of that same kind of questioning on the topic of ethics, how we behave, what is right and wrong, and what entails a good life. So definitely ethics and in alignment with Socrates would be my primary interest in philosophy.
So, what's your favorite part about the ancient world?
Oh my. Whew. Now, let's be frank. The ancient world was tough and rough, and we didn't have the same sort of societal protections that we do nowadays. But I can say that a benefit of the ancient world was the authenticity of living, in which the conflicts, the problems, the issues that people faced were real conflicts and problems that required immediate action. As opposed to today, where I feel like we're so inundated, we're so covered with all sorts of issues, and through the media, we're hit with all sorts of ideas of dubious quality and critiques of dubious legitimacy, that we don't really get a sense of what's important anymore. So I think that living back then, if there was any advantage, it would be that what's important in life took a more preeminent role for people. And also what was real was more important too. But that's just my opinion.
So, could you tell us a bit about Alexander the Great?
Oh, yes. Your namesake, of course.
Yes.
So I also want to ask you a bit about Alexander the Great, like things that you've heard about him and things that you like about him. Alexander the Great was, in his time, a Macedonian king who quite impressively conquered the then dominant political force of the age, which was the Persian Empire. Alexander's conquest of the Persian Empire itself was unique and some might say marvelous in many respects, because he never lost a battle. He was so dominant strategically and tactically. He had a number of generals and officers who were extremely effective at their jobs. Let's not forget his personal qualities. He was extremely well educated, taught by no less than Aristotle, who is arguably one of the greatest philosophers in all of human history. And along with that, spread Greek culture throughout the world, which is why the age that succeeded Alexander is called the Hellenistic age, after Hellenes, the name that the Greeks called themselves. He spread that. He's the one who brought Aristotle's ideas, Plato's ideas, and Socrates' ideas to Africa, Europe, the Middle East, and even parts of Asia, such as India.
So he helped spread philosophy throughout the world?
Philosophy, absolutely. Philosophy, science, as Aristotle was arguably one of the first scientists, and way more. You know, the critical thinking and the critical review of ideas was really spread by Alexander's influence, culturally and academically. He did, after all, have various academics that traveled with him, such as Callisthenes, who was, I believe, I could be wrong in this, the nephew or a relative of Aristotle. And he was also, he also ran afoul of Alexander, being implicated in a plot against him, and he was subsequently executed. So that just goes to show, don't mess around with Alexander the Great. But I'm sorry, I'm losing my point here. Wait, where were we, Alex? I'm sorry. If you
it's fine. We can keep going on and on and on.
Oh, I could, and that's the case with Alexander, absolutely.
So, what do you think is one of your favorite battles that he took place in?
Whoa! All right, I'm just blown away by your questions. My favorite battle. So everybody mentions the Battle of Gaugamela, which is his final battle against Darius. Incredibly dramatic, how he just cuts through the lines of Darius, cuts through the infantry with his cavalry, and very nearly attacks Darius one-on-one. However, my favorite battle is perhaps not a battle exactly, but what is referred to as the Siege of Tyre. This is where the city of Tyre, which was on an island just off the coast of, I suppose, what would be called, let's see here, it was near the Hellespont. It was near the Hellespont where Asia and Europe meet.
Yeah, the Hellespont River.
Yes, it was a strait. It's what you call a strait, now called the Dardanelles. But this island, this not too big island, is actually the origin of a people known as the Phoenicians. They were traders, and traders as in people who traded. Yeah. They were traders and sailors who spread the first written alphabet system. And then that was picked up by many other cultures. So I mention all this just to emphasize that Tyre and its culture were widely respected and well known in their day. And this island fortress of Tyre was unassailable. Nobody could invade this. I mean, think about it. A rock a mile off the shore with essentially a fortress on top of it. How do you get to that? You can't bring an army over over a mile of deep water. You can't send catapults to it. You can't use siege equipment. No, but Alexander did. He decided, after a tense exchange with their diplomats in which he demanded to be let into the city and they refused, he promised that he would go into the city. So he built a passage to the city in a massive months-long construction project, which still stands to this day. You could still see the land connection, the land bridge connection that he built to that island. And then...
So it was a bridge?
It was a bridge. It was a bridge, but more than a bridge, it was a land bridge. It has a specific name, which eludes me right now. But he built this land bridge to connect to the Isle of Tyre, and from there, he engaged in an assault which had to be horrific. The defenders, of course, had all sorts of defenses at their disposal. They had hot oil, hot water that they would dump on the attackers. They had ships that they would send out to attack the construction workers that were building the land bridge. And this went on for many, 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 many months. But eventually, Alexander himself took a ship, I should say, and found an area that was less defended on the island, and through attacking at multiple points, gave enough of a distraction to finally enable a frontal assault that eventually was successful. And the reason this is my favorite of Alexander's battles, or we could say engagements, is that this just showed how darn determined Alexander was. Even in the face of an almost impossible, and I mean seemingly impossible task, he still did everything within his power and more. He pushed himself and his men to achieve the impossible. And he never did anything that, he never asked his men to do anything that he wouldn't do himself. As always, he would be on or near the front lines. As always, he would be fighting with his men, bleeding with his men, getting injured like his men. As always, he would be on watch, where, a lot of the time when you're a soldier, you're just waiting. You're just waiting. And it's stressful waiting, but it's also boring. You're there for hours and hours and hours and hours. He would stay on watch and wait and make sure that his men could get a wink of sleep. So, to sum it up, the Siege of Tyre is my favorite engagement of his because of just how darn difficult it was, and the fact that he was so determined and irresistible in his offense.
So, what kind of summary or type of inspiration do you get from him?
Well, a quote I like from Alexander, I think, sums up why I find him inspiring. It was, anything is possible to he who will try, right? So if we don't attempt to get what we want, then there's no chance for us. But as long as we try and we put effort in, and then are dedicated and consistent in that effort, what is impossible? What can't be done? Well, it seems like, at least in the case of Alexander, almost nothing was impossible as far as what he wanted to accomplish. So Alexander inspires me because he shows what someone can do if they have all the necessary resources, and let's not kid ourselves, he was very wealthy and very well connected and very privileged, but he also dedicated all of those resources and all of himself towards his goals. So that doesn't mean that we have to conquer the world, but when it comes to our goals, we can accomplish them as long as we try at least.
So, what can you tell us about Aristotle?
Well, besides being the famed teacher of Alexander the Great, Aristotle really serves as he really serves as the most comprehensive of the ancient philosophers. Aristotle studied everything. There was almost no subject, with the exception of mathematics, really, that he wouldn't study. Right? He was the originator of a lot of the subjects that we study in school today, such as biology and zoology. He was the first to do it. He created taxonomical systems where he could organize animals by their types, by their features. In the areas of the arts, he was a prominent literary critic. He was the first one to put down what makes certain types of arts effective in their messaging, in their beauty, in their quality. And as well as he went all the way from the arts to the sciences, to philosophy. His Nicomachean Ethics is still studied to this day as one of the big books on ethics. I mean, if you are interested in ethics, if you are a ethics-oriented philosopher, you can't miss it. On another note, his book, The Organon, which was the foundational book on logic, literally began the branch of logic. So logic being the study of justified reasoning. How do we show that our propositions or the things that we say are true actually are true? How do we demonstrate that with our words? He was the one to articulate so many of the subjects that nowadays we just consider to be a normal part of academia. His brilliance is really difficult to overstate. He just had so much that he contributed to almost every field. And I know it sounds like an exaggeration, but it's not. He basically contributed to every academic field you can imagine. Again, with the exception of mathematics, which his teacher, Plato, definitely advocated. So I feel like in some way he was kind of getting away from mathematics, maybe because he was a little tired of Plato at some point.
So fast forwarding to after Alexander, what happened to the world after Alexander's age of conquest?
Oh my goodness. Well, it's a bit like an anime. I hate to say it like that, but it is, because we see a variety of dramatic and incredibly compelling characters, his generals in particular. His generals engage in an era of warring states, which in the levels of political intrigue are hard to match. I mean, you've got guys like, for example, Cassander. Cassander was a brutal and eventual king of Macedon, who carved out his piece of Alexander's empire to be Macedon and Greece. And then you have Ptolemy, Ptolemy the First, Soter. He's called Soter, which means savior. Ptolemy the First was perhaps the smartest of the bunch. He stole Alexander's body as soon as he died in order to legitimize himself as king of Egypt, believe it or not. So he went to Egypt because Egypt was such a strategically powerful place to control. Egypt at the time was a center for agriculture. So he had all the food and all the money. And you're in the middle of a desert. Who wants to invade a desert? I don't know about you, but I don't. So Ptolemy, he rebuffed a lot of the efforts of the other diadochi, they were called, the successors. He rebuffed a lot of the other diadochi as they tried to invade or otherwise destroy him. But Ptolemy really maintained his independence. Another big player in this was a guy named Antigonus. Antigonus has a cool name. He's Antigonus Monophthalmos, which means Antigonus the One-Eyed. And Antigonus the One-Eyed was a former commander of Alexander, just like they all were. But he was older, experienced, and he really knew how to run an army. Antigonus controlled big parts of, I think, let me see, of essentially the Middle East. And as such, he had sort of like this central role, and he soon got ambitious. He had this central position, and he soon got ambitious, and he started trying to conquer everything, right? And then Ptolemy, very smartly, allied with the others, the other diadochi, and said, hey, this guy Antigonus, look at what he's doing. He's trying to conquer everything. We should stop him. And eventually they did. Another big player was a sometime ally of Ptolemy. His name was Seleucus, also known as Seleucus the First Nicator. Seleucus was a guy who looked like a soldier. He was big, he was strong. His symbol was the horns of a bull. Seleucus was sort of like the balance between all of the diadochi. He had good leadership skills. He looked like a leader, so people liked to follow him. He was also a former elite soldier of Alexander. He belonged to what were the group known as the Silver Shields. They were like kind of like his special forces. So Seleucus had it all, and he conquered I suppose you'd say, the east of the Persian Empire, and took control over it. And of course, there were other diadochi. Their various conflicts and issues with one another eventually fell before the growing power of Rome. So they learned about Rome because there was a prominent king of an area of Greece called Epirus. There's a famous soldier, or actually I should say general, another diadochi called Pyrrhus of Epirus. And what Pyrrhus wanted to do was conquer parts of Rome, because in the battles between Antigonus and Ptolemy and Seleucus and these other diadochi, Pyrrhus, as the king of a small country, realized he couldn't quite amass the resources required to stand up to them. So he said, okay, I'll take control of other smaller, less powerful kingdoms that perhaps I could build a power base on. However, he didn't realize that the Romans were rather Greek-like in their technology, and in their culture. They had this unique obsession with just determination. The Romans, you could destroy a whole Roman army, and they would come back next summer with another one, because part of their culture was this faith in themselves that no matter what, they were the ones who were going to win. So anyway, Pyrrhus attacks Rome, and in several battles beats them. However, he's known for saying a famous line after one of those battles. He said, "After another victory like this, we'll be ruined." That's because of how costly each of these battles were, not just in material cost, but the men that he lost. He would be losing his best troops against these Romans who were just so determined and numerous. So eventually, he's killed because a Roman mother throws a roof tile on his head. As the story goes, Pyrrhus is fighting her son on the streets of a city. She actually, I just think it's incredible. This incredible warrior, Pyrrhus, what a great commander, what a scary guy, is taken out by grandma, essentially. So that said, as Rome grows in power, the Hellenistic states, which were controlled by the Diadochi and their successors, weaken. And eventually, it gets to the point where Rome starts flexing its muscles. They cross the Mediterranean, they take control of Greece, and they can take control of, the Antigonid lands, the Seleucid lands, and eventually the last one they take on and conquer is Egypt, where Ptolemy set up his Ptolemaic dynasty. And the last member of that Ptolemaic dynasty, known as the very famous Cleopatra, who eventually becomes involved with Julius Caesar, becomes the last Hellenistic ruler of the Hellenistic age.
Wow. So what do you just get out of Greek culture in Archimedean?
That's a great question. See, Greek culture, as well as you could say Judaic culture, as well as Latin or Roman-inspired culture, all make up what we consider to be Western civilization today, or Western culture. What I get from the Greek culture, and especially within Archimedean, is a focus upon critical thinking and the preeminence of ideas. The Greeks valued ideas, especially ideas that made sense and that were useful. They had a love for theory and for thinking about what is possible. In the golden age of Greece, that Socrates lived in the tail end of, or perhaps saw the end of, we see an explosion of the arts, of culture, of academics that we still feel to this day in Archimedean. After all, no other elementary school that I know of takes the time to study philosophy. And Archimedean, what's more, values philosophy and values the art of thinking, namely logic, and its application within a variety of contexts. So it's not just that ideas are valuable, but ideas are practical and they inspire and motivate us in new ways, in new directions. They innovate our discoveries and our creations. They lead us to new things, and perhaps not always progress, but definitely development upon more ideas. They help us grow, really, especially when we question our own ideas. And nowhere else that I know of does so, or I should say gives such free reign, or not free reign, but gives such a preeminence to ideas, especially the art of thinking.
So what kind of advice would you give to me?
Ooh, now that's a loaded question.
And for other people as well.
Oh, what sort of advice would I give to you? Do you mean in the context of learning? So I'd say, first of all, externally, look for new ideas. find new ideas and question them. Ask what makes them right or wrong. Are they well supported by evidence or reasons? Do they have some sort of basis in facts? Or are they more an extension of somebody's emotions or biases or prejudices? It's easy to have ideas. It's not easy to distinguish between good ideas and bad ideas. What's more is that we have to realize that we all have our prejudices and our gaps in learning or ignorance. We don't know everything. And I, acknowledging that I don't know everything, have to be humble in that acknowledgement. I have to know that you can teach me something. I have to know that any person that I speak to teaches me something or can teach me something or knows something that I've never experienced or feels something that I've never been aware of. So not only be open to ideas, but question ideas, including your own, especially your own, in fact, I'd say, because Socrates really was the exemplar of this. If you don't question your own ideas, you'll probably think you're always right. And if you think you're always right, then you're almost certainly wrong about that.
His famous words were that I know that I do not know.
Exactly. That harkens back to that same sentiment.
Thank you for your time today, and thanks for coming. That's it for today on Living History with Alex. Stay tuned next time for more Living History.